There is a law older than any nation, deeper than any philosophy, and more constant than any changing culture. It was not written by kings or drafted by parliaments. It did not arise from committee debates or academic theories. And yet it governs us all. You were born with it not because you chose it, but because it is a part of what it means to be human. Have you ever noticed that people everywhere, no matter their language or tribe, feel wronged when treated unjustly? A child snatches a toy from another and the injured one cries out, "That's not fair." Who taught them that? No textbook, no code of conduct. It is not logic that produces this protest. It is something older than logic, a recognition of a hidden law. This law is not like gravity or mathematics. It is moral in nature. It whispers sometimes gently, sometimes urgently when you're alone with a decision. Do not lie. Do not betray. Help where you can. Forgive even if it costs you. It is that still, small voice which no one else hears, but you cannot escape. It does not shout. It waits, unhurried, like a truth too patient to be anxious. And yet, in our busy lives, we do try to escape it. We smother it under rationalizations, surround it with excuses, distract ourselves with noise. But you'll notice something tragic. When we do this, the more we silence that inner voice, the more lost we feel. We become excellent in our professions and hollow in our hearts. We can travel the world and yet feel adrift in our own souls. Here is the deeper truth. You were not merely born with this law, you were born for it. You are crafted to live in line with this moral code, as a tree is made to reach for light. This law is not your enemy, it is your true north. When you obey it not out of fear, but out of reverence, you begin to taste something rare in today's world: peace of conscience, clarity of direction, and a strength that no applause can give and no insult can take away. But tread carefully, for this law cannot be broken without consequence. You may gain profit by betraying it. You may win applause by mocking it. But in the quiet hours, when the world falls silent and you are alone with your thoughts, you will feel the wound. It will show itself in your sleepless nights, your strained relationships, your inner unrest. You will discover, too late perhaps, that the price of ignoring this law is not hellfire or judgment from others. It is the quiet decay of the soul from within. And yet, the good news is as profound as the warning. If you return to this law even after wandering far, it will meet you where you are. Like a compass that never loses its direction, it will point you home. And in following it, you will find not restriction, but liberation, because real freedom is not the right to do whatever you please. Real freedom is the power to do what you were made for, and you were made to live in truth, in honor, in courage, and in love. This hidden law was not placed in you to burden you, but to build you. You may think the rules that govern your life come from books, constitutions, courts, or classrooms, and in many ways they do. Society needs structure. We need speed limits so roads aren't chaotic, financial regulations so markets don't collapse, policies so offices function. These are the visible laws, the ones written, signed, printed, and enforced. But beneath them all, often unnoticed and rarely discussed, there lies a law so intimate to your human experience that you've carried it with you since, before you could write your own name. This law did not originate in any government building. No politician passed it. No philosopher invented it. Yet you have felt it in the quiet guilt after telling a lie, in the inner discomfort when you treat someone unfairly, in the instinctive sense of injustice when someone steals what belongs to another. That law was not taught to you, it was recognized by you. It didn't arrive with your education, it arrived with your birth. It is the only law that doesn't need to be read because it is felt. Observe a child before they have ever studied ethics. Even they know when something is not fair. Where does that come from? No toddler studies civil code, yet they appeal to something higher when they're wronged. There's no need to explain why biting someone is wrong. The other child cries, the biter looks guilty. You didn't have to teach it, you only had to witness it. This hidden law manifests itself long before logic ever joins the conversation. And that's the remarkable part. Even in moments when we break this law ourselves, we still expect others to obey it. A person who lies will still demand to be told the truth. A thief still wants his belongings respected. A betrayer may hide his treachery, but he will resent being betrayed. The standard we hold others to is often the same standard we quietly recognize inside ourselves. That is not hypocrisy, it is evidence. It reveals the presence of a moral foundation so deep that it precedes behavior, it defines it. Some may say this law is simply culture, but culture shifts. This law does not. What one society applauds, another condemns. And yet across centuries and civilizations, certain truths remain strangely consistent. Honesty is better than deceit. Courage is nobler than cowardice. Cruelty wounds both victim and perpetrator. You will not find a time in history where being kind to the weak was seen as evil, or where treachery among friends was celebrated as virtue. The forms of justice may differ, but the hunger for it is eternal. Where did that come from? In a world that is constantly changing, this law is stubborn. You can argue against it. You can ignore it. You can even disobey it repeatedly, but you cannot make it disappear. It does not depend on your belief in it to remain true. You can deny gravity and still fall. Likewise, you can reject this hidden law and still find that your actions bring consequences no courtroom ever declared. Look at the moral scandals that erupt in public life. Politicians, leaders, artists, celebrities once praised, now condemned. Why? Because somewhere, even those who adored them recognized they crossed a line. Not a legal line, a human one. There is something in us that shouts that was wrong. Even when no law was technically broken, you cannot legislate love or loyalty or truthfulness. But when those are betrayed, you feel the sting. That is the law at work not on paper, but in people. And consider this, even those who reject all notions of morality still appeal to justice when they feel wronged. A thief may say morality is relative until he is robbed. A cynic may claim there is no truth until he is lied to. The protest reveals the truth. This law does not originate from intellect or belief. It's built into your very structure. It's not something you carry, it's something that carries you. So before we speak of choices, of destiny, of dreams and personal success, we must first return to this foundation. Because it doesn't matter how far you run or how high you climb. If you violate this law, you will feel its weight. Not because someone caught you, but because something inside you knew. And that's where the journey truly begins, not with ambition, not even with action, but with awareness, the awareness that there exists a law beyond all legislation, and it already knows your name. If there truly exists a law that was not written by man, a law that predates governments and operates within every human heart, then there must also exist something within you that interacts with it. That something is your conscience. It is not loud, but it is persistent. It does not argue, but it does convict. It is not a voice you hear with your ears, but one you feel in your chest. It doesn't need language to speak because it communicates in sensation, discomfort, peace, hesitation, or release. It is the silent witness to the hidden law. You have felt it, perhaps more times than you realize. That moment you walked away from a conversation knowing you exaggerated, and something in you turned over. No one challenged you, no one exposed you, but your conscience did. Or maybe you helped someone, gave without being asked, forgave without being begged, and later, when alone, you felt something deep and reassuring settle in your soul. It wasn't pride, it wasn't ego. It was your conscience affirming that was right. Unlike emotion, which rises and falls with moods and moments, conscience remains grounded. Emotions can justify anything if they burn hot enough, but conscience isn't swayed by convenience or comfort. That's why people try to silence it. When conscience speaks against what we want to do, it becomes inconvenient. So we find ways to drown it out through distraction, through rationalization, through repetition of wrong. But the more you suppress it, the more internal conflict grows. You begin to live in tension with yourself. It does not punish with lightning, but it does disturb your sleep. It does not strike with force, but it corrodes your inner peace when ignored long enough. That uneasy silence when you lie awake at night, replaying a decision over and over, is not accidental. You're not simply overthinking. You're encountering a witness that refuses to lie for you. And no matter how long you delay, that stillness will return again and again, asking, "Was that right?" What makes the conscience even more astonishing is that it isn't something you had to install or earn. It came with you. You didn't apply for it. You didn't have to be taught it in any formal way. It was not given to you by culture, though culture may shape how it's interpreted. The core of it is consistent across time and nation. You may come from a tribe in the mountains or a city full of noise, and still feel the same pangs when you betray trust or harm another. This is not coincidence. This is design, and conscience is not only reactive, it can be predictive. It often stops you before you step into something regrettable, that hesitation before sending a cruel message. That pause before you take something that isn't yours. That sudden internal pressure when you hear gossip but choose not to repeat it. You don't need a courtroom or a camera to hold you accountable. Your conscience, if you let it, will serve as your first defense against self-destruction. But just like a compass, a conscience must remain intact to function. You can damage it. The more you ignore it, the quieter it becomes. The more you override it, the more desensitized you grow. What once felt wrong may begin to feel normal not because the act changed, but because your conscience dimmed. That is the true danger of neglecting this inner voice. You don't just lose peace, you lose clarity. And yet, even in this decline, the conscience doesn't disappear. It only retreats. Like a candle in a dusty room, it still flickers, waiting to be uncovered. That's why people who have fallen far often describe a haunting sense of emptiness. It's not just the consequences that hurt, it's the silence of a voice they once knew. But when they begin to return to truth, when they acknowledge the wrong and seek to do right, they find that the conscience can be revived. Slowly but surely it speaks again. What this proves is simple but profound. Your conscience is not your enemy. It is not there to shame you, but to shape you. It is not the voice of guilt. It is the voice of guidance. It is the law within you speaking in a language that is entirely personal yet universally understood. It does not seek to condemn, but to correct, to bring you back into harmony with something greater than impulse, back into alignment with the very law you were born with. Ignore it too long, and you become divided within. Listen to it consistently, and you begin to live whole. It is your truest accountability partner. You can fool others. You can even fool yourself, but you cannot fool your conscience. Because it remembers even when you try to forget, and in that memory, if you listen, there is not only warning, there is wisdom. You can mute the television, silence your phone, even close your eyes to what you don't want to see, but you cannot turn off the voice that lives inside your chest. That voice, your conscience, is the instrument through which the hidden law speaks. And unlike the devices we control, this voice does not come with an off switch. It can be resisted, but not erased. It can be drowned out, but not deleted. No matter how much you argue with it, it returns firm, quiet, and unyielding. It doesn't show up only in dramatic moments. It's not reserved for crises or courtroom-level decisions. It speaks in the ordinary, in the words you choose, in the thoughts you entertain, in how you treat the person no one else is watching you interact with. Its power is in its persistence. The more you try to pretend it's not there, the more you notice its shadow in every decision. Even when you've convinced everyone around you, even when you smile in public, there can be a war in your inner world because the law you were born with refuses to be ignored. And when you repeatedly resist this law, something strange happens. Your external life may grow, while your internal life shrinks. You may gain success, but lose sleep. You may gain followers, but lose peace. You may learn how to smile in front of the camera while breaking down in silence when the lights are off. That's not a matter of ambition or mental strength. That's the effect of living against your own moral current. You can't run from yourself because wherever you go, you bring the law with you. There are people who build elaborate justifications to silence this voice. They appeal to logic, to cultural shifts, to convenience. They say, that's just how the world works, or everyone does it, but that argument doesn't convince the part of you that still flinches when you cross a line. You may succeed in fooling your reasoning mind, but not the deeper part of you that knows. It knows when you made the easy choice over the right one. It knows when you lied not to protect someone, but to protect your image. That knowing doesn't disappear. It collects, it accumulates, and eventually it will speak again. It's possible to wear a mask so long that you forget it's not your face, but the conscience doesn't forget. The law doesn't forget. Even when you've trained yourself to keep moving another task, another distraction, another screen the moment you sit still, it rises again. Not to destroy you, not to punish you, but to invite you back to alignment. That discomfort is not proof that something is wrong with you. It's proof that something is right with you, that you still recognize truth, even when you run from it. And yet, many people live in fear of this voice. They think listening to it will cost them opportunities or relationships. They think it will limit them, but the truth is, it doesn't restrict you, it protects you. It protects your peace, your integrity, your wholeness. People spend years chasing clarity from outside sources, books, gurus, podcasts, but often the clarity they need is already within them. The law isn't missing. It's muffled. There are others who try to bury it beneath ambition. They say, I'll deal with that later. Let me just succeed first. But conscience keeps a different clock. It doesn't wait until your career settles or your finances are strong. It speaks in the now, and if ignored for too long, your success may come at the cost of your soul. That inner voice may go quiet not because it has disappeared, but because you've hardened your heart to it. And what's worse than doing wrong is reaching a point where wrong no longer feels wrong. And yet, even in that state, the law is not defeated. It remains patient and steady, like a lighthouse that keeps shining even when the sailor chooses to sail away. You may damage your sensitivity to it, but the law itself remains unchanged. It does not evolve to match your behavior. You must evolve to match its standard, and deep down you know that standard. You don't need to be told what honesty is, or loyalty, or compassion. The law is already familiar. It has always been with you. This law cannot be bartered with, and it will not flatter you, but it will guide you if you're willing to return to it. You don't need a fresh philosophy or a new identity. What you need is to listen again, even if it has been years, even if you've made peace with habits you know are hollow. The law waits, not with a raised fist, but with an open hand, because the goal of this law is not to shame you for getting lost, it's to show you how to come home. If the law within you cannot be switched off, if it stays with you through silence, distraction, and denial, then it is not merely a passive part of your design, it is a guiding force you were meant to follow. It was never placed in you to be ignored. It wasn't meant to haunt you, but to hold you. You weren't just born with this inner law. You were meant to live in alignment with it. Not occasionally, not when it's convenient, but as a way of being as naturally as lungs draw breath and hearts beat blood. When people live in agreement with this inner law, they don't just feel moral, they feel whole. There is something deeply anchoring about making a decision you know is right, even when it costs you. You sleep better, you speak clearer, Your confidence becomes clean, not because you're perfect, but because you're honest. You're not constantly checking over your shoulder, wondering if the lies will catch up to you, or if the image you project will crumble under pressure. You're free not in the sense of doing anything you want, but in the deeper sense of not being enslaved to guilt, fear, or inner contradiction. You are not made to live in conflict with yourself. That quiet inner ache when you do what you know you shouldn't, that's not emotional weakness. That's misalignment. It's the internal alarm that you are operating outside your original design. It's like running a machine on the wrong type of fuel. It may keep moving, but the damage accumulates, and eventually something breaks. The cracks show up in your peace, your relationships, your self-respect. You begin to survive but not thrive, and you mistake numbness for maturity or silence for strength. This law isn't just about big moral choices either. It affects your ordinary days. It shapes how you treat a waiter, how you speak to your spouse, how you respond to a friend's need when there's nothing in it for you. It shows up in how you manage your time, your thoughts, your attention. The voice within doesn't take days off. It watches not only your actions, but your motives. And if you dare to live honestly before it, you begin to build something that is becoming rare in the world: inner integrity. You weren't designed to be split, one version of yourself for the world, another hidden behind closed doors. That fracture will wear on you. It steals your energy and drains your joy. But when your private life and public life agree, when your words and your intentions line up, there is a quiet strength that builds. It doesn't demand recognition, but people notice. There is weight behind your presence. Not charisma, character. Many people try to chase fulfillment through goals that have no moral structure. They pursue money, beauty, influence, but without a foundation of truth, these things become empty. They achieve and yet feel restless. They're admired but feel invisible, because they were not created to be successful at the cost of their soul. The law in them wasn't placed there to get in their way. It was planted there so their way would be worth walking. You are made to live by that law, not out of religious obligation, but because your well-being depends on it, your mental clarity depends on it, your peace, your purpose, your sense of self all depend on it. When you act against your conscience, even if no one else knows, something in you recoils. You lose the inner permission to enjoy your victories. You start to doubt yourself in ways you can't explain. That's not insecurity, it's inner disintegration. But when you live according to the law within, you gain a rare kind of strength, not the strength to dominate others, but the strength to face yourself without shame, to wake up and not need to pretend, to walk through the day without fearing exposure. That kind of strength is quiet, but unshakable. This is why the hidden law is not merely a tool to avoid guilt, it's the blueprint for human flourishing. When you follow it, life doesn't become perfect, but it becomes ordered. You begin to trust yourself more. You begin to walk lighter, speak clearer, love deeper. You don't just survive, you contribute. Because your life, grounded in what's right, becomes an invitation to others to return to their own inner compass. And the truth is, people are starving for this. They may not know how to say it, but they feel it. They're tired of the noise, the masks, the compromises, and when they meet someone living by the law they themselves have silenced, something awakens in them. You become a mirror, a reminder of what they were meant to be. You living by the law becomes the spark that helps others remember their own. When you choose not to live by the law within you, the very law designed to guide and protect you, the first person who suffers is not society, not the person you lied to, not the stranger you wronged, but you. The moment you step out of alignment with the law, it does not simply accuse you. It begins to reveal the cracks in your own foundation. You might still appear composed on the surface, but your inner world starts shifting. Peace gives way to pretense. Integrity begins to erode, slowly, subtly, like a building quietly sinking into unstable ground. The danger lies in how easy it is to break this law without visible consequences. You can lie and still get the job. You can cheat and still win the game. You can betray someone and still be praised in public. But just because you weren't caught doesn't mean you weren't damaged. The law doesn't need witnesses to begin its work. It responds not with punishment from the outside, but with corrosion from within. You start carrying things you can't talk about, and the weight grows heavier the longer it stays buried. Each compromise may feel small at first, a white lie, a silent betrayal, a short cut you justify, but every step away from the law makes it harder to return. You lose more than peace, you lose clarity. You begin to forget what it feels like to walk through life without looking over your shoulder. You smile at people while managing secrets. You laugh while battling anxiety you can't explain. And eventually, you become a stranger to your own conscience. That disconnection isn't random, it's the consequence of choosing what is convenient over what is right. And the irony is, the moment you break this law, you begin to demand more from others. You become more suspicious, more defensive, more easily offended. Because deep down, you know the standard you've violated, and now you fear others will do the same to you. A liar struggles to trust anyone's word. A deceiver doubts the intentions of every friend. A person who manipulates begins to see manipulation in every gesture. Breaking the law doesn't just injure your peace, it distorts your lens. You stop seeing people clearly because you no longer see yourself clearly. You might convince yourself you're doing what you have to do for survival, for success, for status, but nothing achieved in violation of your conscience will feel like real victory. There will always be a shadow trailing it. A tension that grows with every achievement. It's not because you didn't work hard. It's because you stepped over something sacred to get there, and the deeper part of you knows it. That part doesn't forget. You may numb it, but you cannot delete it. It waits, and the longer it waits, the harder it becomes to recognize who you were before the compromise began. People imagine that guilt is the enemy, but guilt is only a messenger. It points to the wound. What you do with that message determines whether you heal or harden. You can blame others. You can surround yourself with voices that justify your decisions. But when the noise fades and the mask comes off, the truth remains. The break was not only against a principle, it was against your own potential. Because every time you act against the law within, you don't just step away from what is right, you step away from who you could have become. And if you continue long enough, something worse than regret begins to form, acceptance. You start to believe this is who you are now, that the mask is the face, that the shortcuts are your only path forward. And that's where the law does something remarkable. It doesn't scream, it doesn't shame, it waits. It does not vanish even when ignored. And in its waiting, it invites you not to be condemned, but to return. Not for punishment, but restoration. But you cannot be restored until you admit that the damage began with the choices you made, not the people who hurt you, not the system you blame, but the law you violated and the self you betrayed. You can recover wealth, relationships, even status, but recovering your soul requires something more costly, honesty, not with others, with yourself. The moment you acknowledge that your inner unrest comes from stepping outside the law meant to guide you, you begin to reclaim what you lost, not just peace, but power, the power to live clean, to speak with clarity, to stand without fear. That power was never gone. It was buried under compromise, and the return begins not when circumstances change, but when you stop breaking yourself in the name of progress. If breaking the law within you damages your inner self quietly, but thoroughly, then living in alignment with it becomes something far greater than moral correctness. It becomes liberation. And not the kind of liberation we often imagine, where no one tells you what to do, where every door is open, where you are free to act without consequence. That idea of freedom is an illusion, attractive but hollow. True freedom is not the absence of boundaries, it is the presence of the right ones, and the hidden law you were born with provides them not to confine you, but to free you from the invisible chains that choices without conscience create. When people reject the moral law inside them, they believe they are throwing off the weight of judgment, expectation, and limitation. In truth, they're not breaking out, they're binding themselves. They become slaves to secrecy, to image management, to the fear of being found out. Every compromise they make adds a link to the chain. They may appear free, but inside they are governed by what they hope no one sees. They smile wide, but walk cautiously. They speak boldly, but sleep restlessly. Because when you live outside the law that was made to guard you, every step forward feels unstable. No matter how far you go, you're always a moment away from collapse. But when you begin to honor the law within, to live by what you know is right, even when no one's watching, something powerful starts to happen. You move differently. You begin to walk lighter, not because life is easy, but because your heart isn't heavy. You speak with a clarity that doesn't come from rehearsing, it comes from not hiding. You make decisions with peace, not because every outcome is certain, but because you trust your foundation. And that trust, that alignment with the law, is the soil in which freedom grows. You don't need to be constantly calculating who you were in each room or whether someone might reveal what you did last year. You are the same person in private as you are in public. That doesn't mean you're perfect, it means you're whole. The law doesn't expect you to be flawless. It expects you to be honest, accountable, aligned. And that alignment births a kind of freedom that no praise or possession can manufacture. The freedom to be real, the freedom to rest, the freedom to live without the quiet fear of being exposed. This is the paradox most people miss, that freedom, the kind your soul craves, does not come from escaping the law. It comes from embracing it. The law within you is not a prison, it is a path. And the people who walk that path may not always look the most successful on the surface, but they are rich in something much rarer, peace. They're not looking over their shoulders. They're not battling guilt when the room goes silent. They are free to give without manipulation, free to speak without lying, free to fail without shame, because their worth is no longer tied to deception or performance. Their worth comes from living in truth. People spend their lives running from discipline, calling it limitation. But the discipline to live by the law within you is not a loss of power, it is the beginning of it. You gain power over your impulses, your ego, your need for validation. You gain control over the storms within you that once dictated your choices. You don't just react, you respond, not out of fear, but out of conviction. That is not weakness, that is strength, that is freedom with roots. And what's more, when you live this way, you inspire others to do the same, not by preaching, but by presence. You become someone people feel safe around because they know you mean what you say. You become someone others trust, not because you demand it, but because you've built it with consistency, with courage, with quiet obedience to the law that still, somehow, speaks within you. You may never fully explain it, but they'll feel it. It's the weightlessness of a person not carrying secret contradictions. That's what makes your life compelling, not the noise you make, but the freedom you embody. You can pursue every form of success and still feel trapped. You can win applause and still feel alone. But when your life flows in the same direction as your conscience, you gain something this world cannot counterfeit: the freedom of integrity. It cannot be given to you. It cannot be bought or borrowed. It must be lived, and the moment you choose it, everything changes, not because the world suddenly becomes fair, but because you are finally, undeniably free.